Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I want to do this broadcast today about a subject that literally has to do with any human being on the face of this earth, at this time and place that we live in. Because the current situation currently in Israel is no longer confined just to what is happening in the Middle East. It is not just confined to a small country in the Middle East having a confrontation with the, let's say, Palestinian people surrounding them, but it has to do with everybody living today on the face of planet Earth. It's a situation that is extremely dangerous and might escalate into a horrific world war that will be between much more problematic forces than has been, and that could be even nuclear, and could change the face of the earth as we know it today. Therefore, in this time of danger that has to do with all of us, at least the ones that have some conscience, it's worthwhile to take a few minutes and listen to voices which are others than the ones you are used to hear. Voices of reason. Because engaging in a world war is something that you can always start at any point. But finding some other passes, the opportunity will not return again. So we are now in the window of opportunity that might never come again, and every person on the face of the earth will eventually need to contemplate what was his share in pushing to which direction things will turn. Because if you have been in the side that pushed to the direction of true peace and of true solution of the situation in a way that will resolve in peace and quiet for the whole world, then you could really comfort yourself and be proud of yourself that you are on the right side. But in every juncture that we are currently today, it doesn't matter on which side of whatever political map you are, which nation you belong to, which religion you ascribe to, or whatever. If you will know that because of your views on the matter, you have contributed even a bit to the escalation of the world into a bloody world war, which might leave the earth as we know it in a way that will eliminate much of what we view as culture, as civilization, as values. You should ask yourself if you are willing to automatically ascribe to worldviews that push into this direction. And it really doesn't matter which kind of religion you ascribe to, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Jew or you're a Christian, it doesn't matter. At this point in time, we all need to be very, very smart. We all need to be very, very calculated. And try to think maybe we are all being deceived into something we do not really want to be in, unless we are psychopathic, unless we are completely insane. Now, the broadcast I will want to make today is not directed to people that are full of hate. It is not directed to people that want death. It is not directed to people that are blinded by irrational hate. It is directed to rational people. It is directed to people that want good for themselves and for their dear ones. And it is directed to people that are willing to think, that are willing to see that maybe they are being pushed and deceived into having worldviews that are pushing us all into oblivion. It is not directed to religious fanatics. It is not directed to people that think because it is written for them in some book, then they should, according to the way that they interpret it, should kill this or the other person, because these people are troublemakers. They are wrong, they are deceived. But it is directed to those people that maybe are religious, but are truly want to find the true thing that is being requested from them, according to any common sense of faith in God. Anyway, some people might find the things that I will say offensive. I do not care, because I am not saying this in any way to offend anybody. I am saying the things that I will say simply in order to say the truth. Because sometimes the ones that want your favor, your true favor, might be willing to tell you the painful truth, even if you are programmed to find it offensive, instead of the people that flatter to you. For instance, we are programmed to think that Muslims would find any kind of discussion about their faith as offensive immediately and automatically. And by this, we are actually doing the worst kind of flattery. But again, to those people that are truthful people, I say in advance, my intention are not to offend. Any honorable and true person on the face of this earth, no matter what his religion, and particularly if his religion is Islam, has my full respect. And if anything that I say seems disrespectful, but truthful, you should know that it comes of maybe mispresentation on my behalf and not a direct intention to offend. Not at all. So after saying this introduction, let me try to explain the main topics of this broadcast. So the purpose of this broadcast is to describe a few unknown facts and historical truths that are not in the common consciousness. And they are not in the common consciousness because of certain political and indoctrination agendas that have simply erased essential pieces of information from the collective consciousness of all of humanity. And the lack of this information is pushing us all to war. I truly believe that if these historical facts will be remembered, and we will awaken again an array of certain facts that will be in front of our eyes, much less people would be inclined to think that war is necessary. And these facts have to do with the relationship of the Jewish people, of Israel, of the people of Israel, with the Arab nation, before Muhammad, during the time of Muhammad, and after the time of Muhammad. Okay? So meaning the relationship, the historical facts about the relationship between the Arab nation before Islam, during the time of Islam, and in our time. And these things are hidden from the consciousness of a lot of people, Muslims and non-Muslims alike. And in my eyes, because of an agenda that wants us to have war. Now, the truth of the matter, to say this in one sentence, is that in truth, Judaism, Jews and Arabs are not bound to be enemies. This is simply not the truth. Jews and Arabs are not bound to be enemies. And we are programmed in our time, this so-called modern time, in which information is completely available, but by some magical way, we are almost completely ignorant about the truth of things. Okay? So I will try to convince you today that Jews and Arabs do not automatically need to be enemies. So first things first, contrary to what almost everybody knows about Judaism, Judaism does not believe in the exclusivity of the Jewish nation in the eyes of God. Contrary so. People think that Judaism is in some way a spiritual racism, in which the Jewish religion believes that Jews are somehow the chosen people, and only they can reach to heaven. This cannot be farther from the truth. I will not show you many quotes from the Jewish sources that this is not so. The contrary is the truth. Actually, Judaism believes that it is the destiny and the ultimate purpose of all of humanity, first of all, to be worthy of heaven because of their good deeds and their devotion to the truth. And second of all, that in the future to come, faith in God would transcend into all of humanity in a correct and modern and harmonious and peaceful way. Not to say that all people would need to be religious, but there will be a certain spiritual, let's say, spiritual agreement upon all the people of the earth, that there are certain values that unite us all into one humanity, and this will be a time of peace. This is the Jewish faith, completely contradictory to what it is presented to the majority of the public, completely opposite. In this sense, again, I will repeat it. Judaism absolutely does not believe that the Jews have a certain superiority over other nations as a kind of racial understanding. It is almost a complete heresy. Okay? I can show many sources, but I've decided not to show sources in this broadcast because it will simply become endless. If anyone wants to engage in a discussion and to see the sources, I will be glad to give them. Okay? Now, as a result, in particular, the Jewish religion does believe, and it is written in many occurrences, that both Christians and Muslims, if they are true, honest, religious people, are loved sons of God or loved sons of Allah, and of course are the inhabitants of the Garden of Eden. Okay? This is Judaism, simply is. Okay? So in the Jewish books, it is clearly written that all people, technically, assuming that they follow a certain principles of harmony and peace and love and benevolence that resemble the attributes of God, even if they are not religious, but not to mention if they are religious people, are true representatives of the term humanity, and therefore are worthy members of the Garden of Eden. Completely contrary to what most people tend to think. Judaism is absolutely not racist. And as a consequence, Jews also believe that the Muslim religion and the Christian religion, assuming that the people that follow these faiths follow them in true heart and do not harm others By doing so, our, of course, will be led to heaven. In the sense that, for instance, for a Jew, it is not allowed to follow Christianity in terms of adopting a Christian lifestyle, in the sense of making, it's not even not allowed, it's simply like because that according to Judaism, Jews need to do not need to impose upon themselves habits that do not belong to them. Like any nation needs to follow the laws of its nation, of that nation. Yeah, just like if I am an American, or if I am an Israeli, or if I am a French person, okay, I can go and visit Japan, but I cannot say that I am Japanese. It will be a lie. It's simply not who I am. Okay, but Christians can believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ. They can be, they not just can, they are honorable if they are devout followers of the religion, as long as they do not hurt anybody else. And if they do, they have their share of heaven. And similarly, Muslims, Judaism does not think that the path of Judaism is an exclusive path to heaven. Okay? In particular, even before the establishment of these two big religions, Christianity and Islam, the prophets of Judaism, the ancient prophets of Judaism, already in the Bible, you can open the Bible and see, have prophesied to other nations. Talk to them about God. For instance, one of the most famous cases is the prophecy of Jonah the prophet. Jonah went and prophesied to a city called Nineveh. This is in modern day Afghanistan. Okay? Arabs, actually. Okay? And he did not come to them as the God of Israel, right? He came to them as the universal God. And they knew God, and they actually repented, right? So this is a story from the Bible itself, and it is a story accepted also on Islam and so on. So Judaism, since its beginning, there's also other prophets that have prophesied to other nations, for instance, like the prophet of Obadiah, that prophesies to the nation of Edom. Okay? So Judaism, even in the pre-Christian and in the pre-Muslim eras, when we have other historical testimonies for this, for instance, in the writings of Josephus Flavius, the Jewish historian, that mentions in one of his books, which is called Against Apion, how the Jews had an interfaith discussions with the Greeks. Absolutely not any kind of racism and so on, but you truly believe that there should be a universal faith. And in particular, again, assuming that we are talking about a non-violent, non-harmful, non-fundamentalist doctrine that takes the name of God and kills and brings death and suffering and pain to the world in the name of God, as long as people are true believers and truly want for their own soul to connect to God and to connect to other believers of their own faith, it's not only not viewed as negative in Judaism, it is viewed as the purpose of any human being's life according to the path, spiritual path that he chooses for himself. And on the contrary, Judaism actually believes that the path of Judaism is not to be encouraged or imposed on anybody, contrary to other faiths. Okay, Judaism, contrary to other faiths, contrary to Christianity or contrary to Islam, does not see itself as exclusive. On the contrary, in our books it is written, again, in Josephus Flavius, but it is a principle of Judaism, that people that follow the laws instituted for them from any nation, whatever it may be, are honorable people. It's the most honorable thing to consider. We as Jews, it is honorable for us to follow Judaism. Again, Judaism does not even impose its laws on Jews themselves. It is also a matter of choice for Jews, to which extent and in which way they should follow the laws of Judaism. Maybe in the times of Moses it was different, but that is 3,000 years ago. Okay? And even then it requires a lot of study in order to see it properly. So this is fact number one. Judaism has no antics, religious antics against Islam. On the contrary, against Islam or against any other religion, as long as it is peaceful. Okay? As long as it is peaceful, because in Judaism we believe that the principle of faith is peace. A situation of no peace is a situation in which all sides are in separation from God. When you see war, it means that all sides involved are in separation from God Almighty. It cannot be otherwise. War can never be the will of God, according to Judaism. War always happens when both sides violate the will of God, or Allah, if you want. And we will soon touch upon this. So this is on the universal level. Okay? On a universal level, before even a historical perspective, Judaism and Islam, at least from the side of Judaism, are not at war. Judaism passes no criticism on Islam per se, as a faith. God forbid to think like that. Also, Judaism does not pass criticism on Christianity. It has its argument with it on the points of boundary between Judaism and Christianity, or the points of boundary between Judaism and Islam. Of course, if somebody says that in the name of God he thinks he needs to kill you, right? Then it's already your business. But as long as there is no confrontation, Judaism sees any kind of faith that people can say about it, this is my faith and I believe that it brings me to heaven. Jews would only say, I pray that this is so. Not I pray, I believe that this is so, and I pray that you will be successful in your spiritual endeavors, especially if they involve directly the name of God. That's the truth of the matter. Okay? Now, let's talk a bit about history. About the history of Judaism and the Arab nation before Islam. So the truth of the matter is that Jews and Arabs lived in coexistence many years before the time that Islam began. Most people do not know, but the Arab nation is older than the time of Islam. The Arab nation did not begin with the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad. Okay? It existed much beforehand. So much as that in Judaism, but let's say that this is not maybe a historical, it's a spiritual book, yes, but maybe not an historical document. But nevertheless, we have the concepts of the tribes of Ishmael and the kings of Ishmael and the princes of Ishmael in the time of the Bible. Okay? And in the ancient historical books, Arab tribes are mentioned. There were Bedouin tribes, there were Arab tribes, because the Arab nation is a very ancient nation. It exists for thousands of years, much before the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad. Okay? So as historical fact, the Arab nation is older than Islam. It comes even to the days of the Bible. Now it is true that in the Bible we have all sorts of stories, family stories, familial stories, about the relations between the child Ishmael and the child Isaac, that they did not get along together, and there were all sorts of confrontations and so on. But at the end, at least from the point of view of Judaism, we learn that these two siblings came to peace with each other. And it is written that when Abraham passed away, Isaac and Ishmael came together and buried him as two brothers in love. in love with one another, or in relations of peace and love between each other. And our sages teach us that this is also the way it will be in the future. That it's called, in Hebrew, it is called Maaseh Avot, Siman Lebanim. The actions of the fathers are forefathers, the forefathers of the two nations, of Ishmael and Isaac, which are Islam and the Arabs and Judaism. Not yet Islam, yes, but the Arab nation and the Jewish nation will eventually come to peace with each other. And this is one of the prophecies for the end of days. So religiously, we have no confrontation. Ideologically, we have no confrontation between the Arabs and Jews. And also historically, you see, Arabs, as I said, lived in the region of the Middle East since thousands of years. And the historical documents are that Jews and Arabs lived in coexistence. If you would look about all the wars of Israel that were in the region, they were never with the Arab nations. Never, ever. There is not one documented war between Jews and Arabs, even though the Arabs existed. There was wars with the Philistines. There were wars with the Canaanites. There were wars with all sorts of nations, never with the Arabs. Why? Because the Arabs and the Jews were always in good terms. You see, there is even the documentation that at the time of the Hashmonite, when in Hanukkah, there has been instituted the holiday of the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah. This is much even before the time of Jesus, yes, of Christianity, pre-Christianity era. Was instituted the Hashmonite kingdom, and the Hashmonite kingdom had allies with the nearby Arab tribes. They were partners, companions. And this is the historical truth. It is documented in these ancient histories. It is documented in Josephus Flavius. Josephus Flavius writes that in the coalition that was run by one of the Hashmonite kings, his name was Aristobulus, were Arab princes. They were in the coalition, they were in the government. Okay? So Jews and Arabs lived more or less in coexistence since the beginning of time. There's no real reason of war between them. And let me tell you even something more remarkable. The testimonies are that the Arab nations living in proximity to the Jews in ancient times did not only share coexistence, which was political or economical coexistence or military coexistence, which they had. The Arabs and the Jews also shared a similar faith. And this is something that people do not like to talk about so much. What do I mean by similar faith? The Arabs, the ancient Arabs, because you see, there is a certain historical, I want to be careful here, but there is a certain historical misperception that the Arab nation knew about God only when Islam came into the world. This is historically incorrect. And again, facts cannot have enemies. And it is not degrading or disrespectful towards anything. It's just a fact. The truth of the matter is that the Arabs believed in God and believed in Allah long before Islam. And they have always learned of faith in God and faith in Allah from and together with their Jewish brothers. Meaning, to a certain extent, some foundations of what is currently called Islam are more ancient than Islam. They come all the way back, if you will want to take an allegorical way of thinking about it, they come all the way back to the root of the Arab nation in Ishmael, where both Ishmael and Isaac learned about God from Abraham. And by the way, this God forbid to say that this is somehow derogatory against Islam, because it is written in the Quran itself. Okay? The Quran itself says that Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, did not come to renew or to invent the faith in God. The faith in God by itself is quite ancient. Abraham himself is considered the first of believers, and Abraham had 2 sons. Okay? The common root of both nations. Now, historically, this is simply the way it is. Many things that people think that originated from Islam around more than a bit of 1,000 years ago are actually much more ancient. And in the root should have not had hate between each other. Meaning that the principles of faith between the 2 religions, the pillars on which they are both instituted, are similar. So there absolutely should not be any war and confrontation between the 2. Muslims, before Islam, Arabs, are known historically, it is documented historically, that they have conducted circumcision. It is not just written in the Bible, it's simply historical evidences that the Arab tribes have done circumcision even before the time of Muhammad. And similarly, the eating of halal meat, that is properly slaughtered according to religious laws, is also not an invention of Islam. Muslim Arabs have done this long time before. And for a long time, Arabs used to eat the meat slaughtered by Jews. Meat slaughtered by Jews, according to Arab and Muslim sources, is considered, for many Muslims, halal. You will see in Europe, many Muslims, where there is no halal meat, they will go to the kosher shops and buy meat. So what kind of deception are we going through to think that it is mandatory for Muslims and Arabs, for Muslims and Jews to be at war with each other? So the Muslims will say no. Some, God forbid, some Muslims, the kinds of Hamas and ISIS and all these destroyers of the world, will come and say, no, it is written in the Hadith that we need to kill Jews. We need to kill and obliterate Jews like some Nazi concentration camps. But these fools, these uneducated fools, do they not know the history? They don't know anything about the history. Let's put for a moment what happened with Muhammad aside. Jews have been living in Muslim countries for ages, for hundreds of years. Much more honorable Muslims than they did not kill and slaughter Jews. So from where came to them this idea? Let me give you 2 examples. For instance, Hamas claimed to be the continuation of the Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab. Now, the historical documents document something completely different than what we see in Hamas. So what? He was less Muslims than they are? He was less Orthodox Muslims than they are? Okay. So first of all, one of the first things that Umar done when he liberated Jerusalem from the Christian dominion is to let Jews come into Jerusalem. It's a historical fact. He opened the gates of Jerusalem to Jews. So much that in our books, Umar is considered a righteous king. So how can the people that today want to slaughter all Jews think that they are the followers of Umar? What, they're more righteous Muslims than Umar himself? Umar didn't kill and slaughter Jews. It's not the history. He because you see, during the time of the Christian era in Jerusalem, when the Christians dominated before the dominion of Islam, the Christian church did not allow Jews at all to live in Jerusalem. They were banned from entrance to Jerusalem. And Umar reversed this ban, let Jews in. Do you think Hamas today would let Jews live in Jerusalem if they would occupy the city? So what? They are more righteous than Umar? Another example, Salah ad-Din. One of the greatest images of the Muslim world. The symbol of a Muslim in the eyes of so many Muslims, including Hamas. They bear his name, Salah ad-Din, all day long. They see themselves as the continuation of Salah ad-Din. Now, did Salah ad-Din indiscriminately kill Jews? No. On the contrary, when he again conquered Jerusalem from the hand of the Christians, again he let Jews live in the city. That's the historical fact, you cannot deny it. Because, for instance, we have books from very big, prominent rabbis that mention how respectful Salah ad-Din is towards Judaism and towards the Jews of Jerusalem. So Hamas want to say that they are the continuation, and they steal the mind of the people in such a way that are so uneducated. They show them some quote from the Hadith and tell all the world that this is Islam. It's simply against the facts of historical facts. Jews have been living for centuries in all sorts of Muslim lands, in Morocco, in Iraq, in Iran, in all these places. Did they commit genocide against Jews in such a way? In the name of Islam? What are we talking about? People are trying to drive into a religious war that has no basis. It exists only in the mind of crazy fanatics that are uneducated. There is no basis for a war between Islam and Judaism. It's simply a fabrication of completely ignorant and uneducated people. The whole world is being dragged by the nose into a World War III by people that simply do not know historical facts. Another example. According to the historical testimonies, after the first years of the occupation of Jerusalem by Islam, Jews were not only allowed to go to Jerusalem, they were allowed and encouraged to go to the Temple Mosque and to the Temple Mount and pray in the site of the Golden Dome, what is today the Golden Dome. So much that Umar included within the Muslim Waqf, meaning the guard of the Jerusalem holy sites, in Temple Mount, Jews. The original Waqf, the original keepers of the holy sites in the time of Umar and the Khalifates were Jews. Completely different than anything that is being tried to re-indoctrinate us. A different history, let's say. The true history. So the world is being pushed today into World War because of false disinformation, indoctrination that is clearly not in the hand of the wise people. We are all led by fools to a war that is completely unnecessary between two civilizations that shouldn't be in war. This is so far historical discussion. And again, there is much, much more to say. If we will need to give all the historical sources of this, it would take a few hours. And the truth is, the world doesn't have much more than that. So let's be a bit more hasty in that. Now let's discuss a bit sensitive issue. The issue of Muhammad himself and the wars of Muhammad against the Jews in the time of Muhammad. And again, everything I say is with the utmost respect to the faith of anybody, especially religious faiths that we respect and have absolutely only the highest sensitivity for the true and honorable feelings of any faith in the world. But again, we are saying the things that we say with honor and with good intention, and without, God forbid, without no criticism. As we know, Muhammad in his wars fought against Jewish tribes in the time of the beginning of Islam. This is documented history. Now, our rabbis, historian rabbis, clearly say that, for instance, we have a rabbi that his name is WWIII. He was a historian of this time. Let me show him to you. Just a moment. By the way, a Zionist rabbi that wrote about the history of Islam, amongst other things. He wrote many, many books in history about almost all of human history, spanning almost all of human history and the relationship to Israel. You can see his picture here. It's extremely, extremely knowledgeable. And he wrote something very remarkable. By the way, God willing, I will want to make a broadcast about all the discussions in Judaism about Islam. Okay? And you will be surprised how respectful the Jewish rabbis are towards Muhammad. Things and quotations that you will not believe that we have in our literature, and they exist. Praising him, saying good things and positive things about him, and so on. Highly respectable. Yeah? Now, this historian, Rabbi WWIII, which was an ardent, very, very, very strong Zionist, yes? He said that the truth of the matter is that the Jewish tribes in the time of Muhammad indeed made many mistakes and treated in a negative way Muhammad in a way that has pushed him into war with them. This is the things written. And out of a miscalculation and disrespect towards this great force that came into the world, and have turned him from an ally of the Jewish of the Israeli nation into one that has huge criticism against the Jews that he encountered. This being said, Muhammad did kill many of these Jews. Okay? But first of all, in the origin, Muhammad instituted the Constitution of Medina, in which he expressed coexistence between Jews, Muslims, and Christians. That was the Constitution of Medina. The reason for the war between Muhammad and the Jewish tribes of Arabia, were because they violated the Constitution. Okay? But the original intention of Muhammad was coexistence between the different three faiths. And as we see, the followers of Muhammad, the true followers of Muhammad, including the Khalifites, including the most direct spiritual descendants of Muhammad, applied these values of this constitution in practice under their dominion. So much that in Judaism we have a concept that is called the Golden Age. The Golden Age of the Jews living in the Arabian countries, in the Sephardic Jews, which is the time in which Jews and Muslims lived in coexistence. They done science together, they done music together, they done art together, they done many, many wonderful things together. Astronomy. You know, it's quite remarkable things, but the science that came out from the cooperation between Jews and Muslims at these times, well, first of all, way light years ahead than what was in the European countries at that time. At that time, Europe was in the Middle Ages. And science and philosophy and religious thought flourished in these Muslim states, cooperating with the Jews. Again, really like brothers. Where is this? What happened to this? We are today, 2023. We think that Jews and Muslims need to slaughter each other. What happened to history? How is it possible that 800 years ago, people were more civilized than us today? Does this seem reasonable to you? So, regarding the wars of Muhammad, the Jews of Arabia that fought against Muhammad, they do not represent the whole of the Jewish nation. They do not. The truth is, we hardly know anything about them. You see, Jewish communities always have rabbis. We have rabbis that we know. Here in Babylonia, there was this and this rabbi. Here in Persia, there was this and this rabbi that was a righteous rabbi that was a leader of community, some community. All the Jewish tribes that are mentioned in the wars of Muhammad against Jews, we don't know anything about their leaders. We don't even know that if they had a religious leadership. So how can they represent the whole Jewish nation? No. And here, I will say something that is a bit sensitive. It is not truly sensitive because you will see it's still respectful. But it is from the point of view of Judaism. I will say something from the point of view of Judaism, and then you will ask yourself if, you will see that it is true. In Judaism, the concept of prophecy begins from Judaism after all, right? All the prophets that the Quran ascribes to, aside from Muhammad, which came after, are from the Bible, from the Jewish Bible. Now, the Jewish faith, if you will say about prophets, is that they are the representatives of God's word. And in this sense, as long as God channels through them and gives them prophecy, what they say is synonymous with God's word. But they are not God himself. And in this, I think Islam is also trying to teach this when it refers to Jesus Christ, right? Because what does Islam say? It says the Christians, what is their mistake? According to Islam, again, I'm not going, and also with respect to Islam, God forbid, I'm not trying to say that any faith is mistaken or whatever. I'm just giving insight from Jewish teachings, which I think is universal, but it refers to our religion, okay? And I'm not passing criticism, I'm just mentioning the fact that Islam says that Christian has mistakes in it, okay? As far as I understand. The mistake is that the Islam says that the Christians view Jesus Christ as the Son of God, as God himself. And Islam says he's not Son of God, he's a prophet. What's the difference? The difference is that a prophet is not God. And forgive me if I am saying something wrong, but I think the contrary, I'm saying something that is absolutely right. Some people that ascribe to themselves as Muslims fall into exactly this kind of thing that Islam criticizes about Christianity on their own faith. Meaning their love to Muhammad, which is honorable, their passion and their devotion to their prophet, to Muhammad, makes them a bit how would I say it, diverge into blurring the boundaries between the prophet of the religion and God himself. Okay? And again, I'm saying this very, very sensitively. It's not God forbid to say that the prophet is a low degree. Prophet is the messenger of God, the representation of God, and so on. This is the highest degree a human being can come to. But let's go back to Judaism for a moment. In Judaism, we have a very clear distinction with respect to Moses. And Moses is also one of the prophets of Islam. So let's go back to the Bible. I'm stepping away from Islam. We no longer refer to Muhammad, which is prophet of Islam, representation of Allah for Muslims. God forbid to say anything bad about it. But back to Judaism when we speak about Moses. If you will see, in the Jewish Bible, when it speaks about Moses, it's very clear that Moses is a prophet of God. But Moses is not considered the epitome of perfection as God himself. So much so that the Bible itself teaches us that when Moses acted according to his own authority, he could have acted not in full accordance with the will of God, because he acted as a human being. And this is a very sensitive thing, but this is the truth. For instance, the Bible teaches us that there was an instance in which Moses hit the stone in the desert. And when he hit the stone in the desert, he done it on his own accord. And it's something that Moses, even though that he was a prophet, even though that he was the chosen prophet of God, even though he took Israel out of Egypt, even though he was the best human being that the world has ever seen until this point, when he acted as a human being, not through the channel of God, his decision was not ultimate. And this is something the Bible comes to teach us in Judaism. To discern and differentiate, and this is a mercy from God. It's a merciful thing from God. Because to explain that even very, very high people are still human. They are not God. And in this sense, in Judaism, we view Moses as a human being. The Bible comes to teach us that he's a human being. Why did God do this? After all, God does everything. Why did God give us this lesson? That Moses hit the stone and it was not God's will. So that God forbid we will not fall into idolatry of making Moses into a god and making him into a godling. Worshipping Moses and not God. So in Judaism, God has instituted for us this story as a mercy from God towards Moses, so that he will not fall into becoming an idolatry figure. So that we will not think that he is God himself. But to show that he can also be human. And this is it seems like a negative thing, but it is actually a mercy from God. Similarly, we have another prophet, Elijah. Elijah, we are taught, killed and slaughtered 400 of false prophets of the Baal. He was certain that he will do this and it will be in God's favor. But God tells to Elijah that it is not what he wanted, even though he was a prophet. So in Judaism at least, we do not view prophets as non-human, as God, as the representation of God himself, but rather as the chosen from within the human race to be channels so that God's will could be channeled for them. But the actions of the prophets at a given place and time can be more like the action of a king than as the action of an eternal truth. For its time, it might be the truth, but it is not necessarily an eternal spiritual truth that should be replicated for eternity on. Because Moses was considered a king, and his law was law as a king. Moses was also in the Bible, sometimes very radical. The Bible describes that Moses slaughtered and killed all the people that went and made the golden calf. Does it mean that now as Jews we need to do this again? No. Okay? So, in truth, Islam and Judaism should not be in war with each other. They are being pushed into it because of false disinformation. And I hope that this, at least, seems to me short, but it's I see already that's quite long. Introduction maybe makes you see things otherwise. Another topic that we have not discussed at all is the current situation in which Islam became blended with the Palestinian issue. And this is also something that needs to be deneutralized, like a bomb that you need to neutralize. Palestine and Islam are things that are completely irrelated to each other. And the mixture between them is harmful. Harmful for Muslims, harmful for Palestinians. That being said, I will not expand on this now because it will become already too long. But just to say things short, of course, no human suffering is justified. Human suffering is the exact thing that religion needs to bring to a minimum, because religion needs to bring peace. But sometimes when two things that are two problems, or two things that needs to be directed each one separately, when they mix together, they become impossible to solve. Specifically, in order to solve the Palestinian issue, and in order to solve the suffering of some of the peaceful Palestinian population within the Palestinian people, the best would be to untangle the seeming bond between Islam and Palestine. It does not serve any of the two. In Islam, there is no notion of Palestine. Muhammad did not refer to the land of Israel as the land of Palestine. He called it Israel. He viewed the land of Israel as belonging to the Jews. He viewed the land of Israel as he did not call it Palestine. That's just the fact of the matter. The only place in Quran in which the term Palestinians appear is with respect to Goliath. Goliath, the enemy of David, King David, the enemy of God. Okay, so the term Palestinian in Islam is a very negative term. That being said, it's not to say that the Palestinians themselves are negative. It's only to say that the mixture between the two things is again artificial. It is based on disinformation. It is based on directing huge forces within civilization into an unsolvable conflict. And that is what we need to neutralize, especially those people that want to have true peace. And pushing people to fight civilizations one against the other will bring no good to anybody. Jews against Muslims, Muslims against Jews, Palestinians against Jews, it's not going to work. The only thing that will work is to think together, and especially the people that believe in God should believe that true faith in God is peace. It should involve the true belief that even if God instituted certain civilizations, He has organized them in such a way that with wisdom and with the goodwill, they could live in coexistence one in front of the other. Only without the forces of warmongers and the forces that want evil and death and suffering for others. And those who want this are the enemy of all humanity, are the enemies of everybody. And it cannot be. There is a very tiny minority of people that are really truly psychopaths and want war and suffering for others. Most people do not want it. Most normal people do not want such suffering. Only really those that are insane. And this insanity cannot spread over to the whole of humanity, dragging us all into world war. So, friends, inshallah, God willing, the peaceful and wise within humanity will uplift each other, and we will come together to find solutions for peace. We have today abilities that never existed before, even this broadcast, to speak in such a way and to bridge between distances of nations and time and space. This does not exist. If even 10 years ago, this is messianical times. Let's use these tools together, the wise people within humanity, to unite and bring peace. So, salam alaikum, shalom aleichem, peace be upon you, goodbye.